Welcome to U.S. History. This is chapter 1.5, or about halfway through chapter 1. On today's episode, you'll meet the richest person who ever lived. So let's get started. All right. You need to know the Silk Road. Do you know what the Silk Road is? Okay. Do you remember that from 6th grade? You do, kind of? Okay, I'll help you out. No worries. Silk Road's a big deal. It's the foundation or the origin is a better word for it, of global trade, okay? We'll talk about the trade for gold and salt. We'll talk about European heritage, Greek and Roman, Judeo-Christian, Greek and Roman, Middle Ages. We're going to talk about the printing press. You need to make sure you understand how the Greek and Roman cultures influence the United States, okay? Make sure you know that. The printing press, what is it? The Silk Road, what is that? Make sure you know that today. Let's get going. Who was Mansa Musa? Okay, he's an extremely rich African king. He makes an important Hajj or pilgrimage. We'll talk about it. Why did the Europeans want to sail to Asia and bypass the Silk Road? They want to cut out the middleman. So here's the deal. There's a Silk Road. It's a trade network. They want to get a better deal. They're going to finance a guy named Christopher Columbus to find the better route that he's going to run into America. So this is setting up the discovery of North America. I put discovery in quotation marks because we've already talked about people that were living here for thousands of years. What's the center of the Aztec Empire? Tenochtitlan. And they're building out their little gardens. What's that called? Chinampas. All right, awesome. What are the Greek and Roman origins of American democracy? Okay, Greeks bring us democracy, pure vote, one person, one vote, most votes win. And then Rome brings us a republicanism, which is you're going to have a representative represent you. If you really want to get technical, we're some type of democratic republic, but in the Pledge of Allegiance, it's to the republic for which it stands. If you want to debate it with me or talk more about it, we can. Okay. Okay, global trade. These are all the trade routes. This isn't just the Silk Road. The Silk Road is here, here, over here, but this is what they want you to get from this picture. No one's really discovered America, obviously, aside from the people that live there. And the world's booming, okay? We got trade going back and forth. It's, there was a world before America, there was a world before that, and there was a world before that, and it goes all the way back thousands of years ago. And so they want you to know, look how connected the world is. Now, there's a huge difference, okay? Yeah, you can get products from China. We'll see you in 3 to 6 months, not we'll see you tomorrow. Does that make sense? Like the speed has really changed. Trade routes for spices start off around Asia. Arab merchants caravan it to the Mediterranean, then it ships to Italy. So what happens as it goes through each one of these places? What happens when everyone touches it? The price goes up, okay? Also, worth noting, the Silk Road, it's not one road, it's a section of many roads. Just a little tidbit there. Okay, so Africa trades in gold and salt. Why would you trade gold for salt? Why would salt be so valuable? Take a think on it. Why would salt be so valuable? Did you get it? It's to preserve food. There's no refrigeration back then, so if you like to keep your food fresh, you need salt. And you can't eat gold, so they're willing to trade gold for salt. That's how valuable of a commodity it is. Okay, so Mansa Musa, the Mali king, and then he makes his Hajj over here to Egypt. And when he does, he's going to give away gold. What does that do to the economy? If we just print extra money, what does that cause? Inflation. Have you heard of that term before? Okay, so he's going to cause inflation. Let's watch this video.
If someone asked you who the richest people in history were, who would you name? Perhaps a billionaire banker or corporate mogul like Bill Gates or John D. Rockefeller. How about African King Musa Kita I? Ruling the Mali Empire in the 14th century CE, Mansa Musa, or the King of Kings, amassed a fortune that possibly made him one of the wealthiest people who ever lived. But his vast wealth was only one piece of his rich legacy. When Mansa Musa came to power in 1312, much of Europe was racked by famine and civil wars. But many African kingdoms and the Islamic world were flourishing, and Mansa Musa played a great role in bringing the fruits of this flourishing to his own realm. By strategically annexing the city of Timbuktu and re-establishing power over the city of Gal, he gained control over important trade routes between the Mediterranean and the West African coast, continuing a period of expansion which dramatically increased Mali's size. The territory of the Mali Empire was rich in natural resources, such as gold and salt. The world first witnessed the extent of Mansa Musa's wealth in 1324, when he took his pilgrimage to Mecca. Not one to travel on a budget, he brought a caravan stretching as far as the eye could see. Accounts of this journey are mostly based on an oral testimony and differing written records, so it's difficult to determine the exact details. But what most agree on is the extravagant scale of the excursion. Chroniclers describe an entourage of tens of thousands of soldiers, civilians, and slaves, 500 heralds, bearing gold staffs and dressed in fine silks, and many camels and horses bearing an abundance of gold bars. Stopping in cities such as Cairo, Mansa Musa is said to have spent massive quantities of gold, giving to the poor, buying souvenirs, and even having mosques built along the way. In fact, his spending may have destabilized the regional economy, causing mass inflation. This journey reportedly took over a year, and by the time Mansa Musa returned, tales of his amazing wealth had spread to the ports of the Mediterranean. Mali and its king were elevated to near legendary status, cemented by their inclusion on the 1375 Catalan Atlas. One of the most important world maps of medieval Europe, it depicted the king holding a scepter and a gleaming gold nugget. Mansa Musa had literally put his empire and himself on the map. But material riches weren't the king's only concern. As a devout Muslim, he took a particular interest in Timbuktu, already a center of religion and learning prior to its annexation. Upon returning from his pilgrimage, he had the great Djinguereber Mosque built there with the help of an Andalusian architect. He also established a major university, further elevating the city's reputation and attracting scholars and students from all over the Islamic world. Under Mansa Musa, the empire became urbanized, with schools and mosques in hundreds of densely populated towns. The king's rich legacy persisted for generations, and to this day, there are mausoleums, libraries, and mosques that stand as a testament to this golden age of Mali's history.
Welcome back. I hope you thought that was interesting. It's definitely worth noting the richest person in the world, right? Ever. Most advanced technology at the time, compass, trading silk. Okay, so the most advanced country at this time will be China. And they're going to have the compass and they're going to have spices. And here is a good color picture of the Silk Road. Here is a video about the Silk Road.
A banker in London sends the latest stock info to his colleagues in Hong Kong in less than a second. With a single click, a customer in New York orders electronics made in Beijing, transported across the ocean within days by cargo plane or container ship. The speed and volume at which goods and information move across the world today is unprecedented in history. But global exchange itself is older than we think, reaching back over 2,000 years along a 5,000-mile stretch known as the Silk Road. The Silk Road wasn't actually a single road, but a network of multiple routes that gradually emerged over centuries, connecting to various settlements and to each other, thread by thread. The first agricultural civilizations were isolated places in fertile river valleys, their travel impeded by surrounding geography and fear of the unknown. But as they grew, they found that the arid deserts and steppes on their borders were inhabited not by the demons of folklore, but nomadic tribes on horseback. The Scythians, who ranged from Hungary to Mongolia, had come in contact with the civilizations of Greece, Egypt, India, and China. These encounters were often less than peaceful. But even through raids and warfare, as well as trade and protection of traveling merchants in exchange for tariffs, the nomads began to spread goods, ideas, and technologies between cultures with no direct contact. One of the most important strands of this growing web was the Persian Royal Road, completed by Darius I in the 5th century BCE. Stretching nearly 2,000 miles from the Tigris River to the Aegean Sea, its regular relay points allowed goods and messages to travel in nearly 1/10 the time it would take a single traveler. With Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia and expansion into Central Asia through capturing cities like Samarkand and establishing new ones like Alexandria Eshat, the network of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian culture and trade extended farther east than ever before, laying the foundations for a bridge between China and the West. This was realized in the 2nd century BCE when an ambassador named Shang Qian, sent to negotiate with nomads in the West, returned to the Han Emperor with tales of sophisticated civilizations, prosperous trade, and exotic goods beyond the Western borders. Ambassadors and merchants were sent towards Persia and India to trade silk and jade for horses and cotton, along with armies to secure their passage. Eastern and Western routes gradually linked together into an integrated system spanning Eurasia, enabling cultural and commercial exchange farther than ever before. Chinese goods made their way to Rome, causing an outflow of gold that led to a ban on silk, while Roman glassware was highly prized in China. Military expeditions in Central Asia also saw encounters between Chinese and Roman soldiers, possibly even transmitting crossbow technology to the Western world. Demand for exotic and foreign goods and the profits they brought kept the strands of the Silk Road intact, even as the Roman Empire disintegrated and Chinese dynasties rose and fell. Even Mongolian hordes, known for pillage and plunder, actively protected the trade routes rather than disrupting them. But along with commodities, these routes also enabled the movement of traditions, innovations, ideologies, and languages. Originating in India, Buddhism migrated to China and Japan to become the dominant religion there. Islam spread from the Arabian Peninsula into South Asia, blending with native beliefs and leading to new faiths like Sikhism. And gunpowder made its way from China to the Middle East, forging the futures of the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires. In a way, the Silk Road's success led to its own demise as new maritime technologies like the magnetic compass found their way to Europe, making long land routes obsolete. Meanwhile, the collapse of Mongol rule was followed by China's withdrawal from international trade. But even though the old routes and networks did not last, they had changed the world forever, and there was no going back. Europeans seeking new maritime routes to the riches they knew awaited in East Asia led to the age of exploration and expansion into Africa and the Americas. Today, global interconnectedness shapes our lives like never before. Canadian shoppers buy T-shirts made in Bangladesh. Japanese audiences watch British television shows, and Tunisians use American software to launch a revolution. The impact of globalization on culture and economy is indisputable, but whatever its benefits and drawbacks, it is far from a new phenomenon. And though the mountains, deserts, and oceans that once separated us are now circumvented through supersonic vehicles, cross-continental communication cables, and signals beamed through space rather than caravans traveling for months, none of it would have been possible without the pioneering cultures whose efforts created the Silk Road.
Okay, welcome back. So again, Silk Road, what's happening? We're trading items. Once it gets here, it can go up into Italy. But every time it hits a dot, it's going to go up in price. The Europeans, they're looking for a cheaper way to get these goods from China. All right. Why do people cross the land bridge? To find new hunting grounds. Do you remember that? Okay. Oh, no, this is one. I don't want to skip this one because I think I babbled a little bit on the question. Let's do it right. Before the Europeans, the most advanced culture in North America was in which modern day country? Thoughts will shape how you view law and government and how you live. Okay? So let's talk about them. This one's about democracy.
Hey, congratulations! You've just won the lottery. Only the prize isn't cash or a luxury cruise. It's a position in your country's national legislature. And you aren't the only lucky winner. All of your fellow lawmakers were chosen in the same way. This might strike you as a strange way to run a government, let alone a democracy. Elections are the epitome of democracy, right? Well, the ancient Athenians, who coined the word, had another view. In fact, elections only played a small role in Athenian democracy. with most offices filled by random lottery from a pool of citizen volunteers. Unlike the representative democracies common today, where voters elect leaders to make laws and decisions on their behalf, 5th century BC Athens was a direct democracy that encouraged wide participation through the principle of ha boulamenos, or anyone who wishes. This meant that any of its approximately 30,000 eligible citizens could attend the ecclesia, a general assembly meeting several times a month. In principle, any of the 6,000 or so who showed up at each session had the right to address their fellow citizens, propose a law, or bring a public lawsuit. Of course, a crowd of 6,000 people trying to speak at the same time would not have made for effective government. So the Athenian system also relied on a 500-member governing council called the boule to set the agenda and evaluate proposals, in addition to hundreds of jurors and magistrates to handle legal matters. Rather than being elected or appointed, the people in these positions were chosen by lot. This process of randomized selection is known as sortition. The only positions filled by elections were those recognized as requiring expertise, such as generals. But these were considered aristocratic, meaning rule by the best, as opposed to democracies, rule by the many. How did this system come to be? Well, democracy arose in Athens after long periods of social and political tension, marked by conflict among nobles. Powers once restricted to elites, such as speaking in the assembly and having their votes counted, were expanded to ordinary citizens, and the ability of ordinary citizens to perform these tasks adequately became a central feature of the democratic ideology of Athens. Rather than a privilege, civic participation was the duty of all citizens, with sortition and strict term limits preventing governing classes or political parties from forming. By 21st century standards, Athenian rule by the many excluded an awful lot of people. Women, slaves, and foreigners were denied full citizenship, and when we filter out those too young to serve, the pool of eligible Athenians drops to only 10 to 20% of the overall population. Some ancient philosophers, including Plato, disparaged this form of democracy as being anarchic and run by fools. But today, the word has such positive associations that vastly different regimes claim to embody it. At the same time, some share Plato's skepticism about the wisdom of crowds. Many modern democracies reconcile this conflict by having citizens elect those they consider qualified to legislate on their behalf. But this poses its own problems, including the influence of wealth and the emergence of professional politicians with different interests than their constituents. Could reviving election by lottery lead to more effective government through a more diverse and representative group of legislators? Or does modern political office, like Athenian military command, require specialized knowledge and skills? You probably shouldn't hold your breath to win a spot in your country's government. But depending on where you live, you may still be selected to participate in a jury.
Okay, so in Athens, you have direct democracy. You vote on the issue. That is not how we have, America is not a direct democracy. Okay, you do not vote on issues very often. We do have proposition this or that. There is a little bit of limited democracy, but for the most part, you vote for people. And then those people vote for the law or the issue. Does that make sense? Now, there's a new technology which we could make it a direct democracy if we wanted to, where the law could come up on your phone and you could just vote and we wouldn't need senators in theory. But the founding fathers would have been against that. Why? So what's the advantage of the Roman system where people choose representatives and they do the voting for you? Well, the advantage is they might be more educated about a particular subject. They might be able to see the long term where you're just kind of gonna, you might not understand something because you're busy, you got work and they can just dedicate more time to it. And then, you just want the quick return, and they can think long term. But on the flip side, what's the disadvantage of it? Well, you voted for them, and then they turn around and say, too bad, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm getting bought off by this guy, and I'm going to do whatever I want. So there's pros and there's cons to the Republican form of government. By the way, Plato's famous ship of state analogy, he says, who should be in charge of the ship? The captain, not the people. I like to use the plane of state analogy. You're flying in a plane, something goes wrong. Should we all vote? Everybody gets a vote? Or should the pilot decide? Does that make sense? Like, he's the only one that really knows how to fly the plane. Or should we be a democracy where we all get to vote? Because that's more fair. See, it's complicated, right? I'm not telling you one's better than the other, or this is good and that's bad. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. I'm just trying to get you to think, it is good that everybody gets a vote, but it's also good if we have representatives. Well, it is good if we have representatives if they do what we want, but what if they don't do what we want? See, it's interesting, right? Okay, great. So when it comes to it, we get this is the short and easy way to know. When it comes from Greece, which is Athens, Greece, they're going to come up with the concept of voting. We're going to have voting. When it comes from Rome, our structure is much more Roman, especially when you talk about Senate and having divisions. Okay, they had a consul, they had a Senate, and then printing press. For the first time in history, everyone can read the same book at the same time. The printing press might not sound like a big deal, but it blows up human knowledge. The printing press is the internet of the day. And when it comes to the Reformation, instead of just tearing down the thesis and throwing them away, they can print them out and never get rid of. You can't get rid of ideas. You can't just burn the book because there's 100 books now. And so the printing press makes things happen. Here we go. U.S. Congress is most similar to which historical governing body? At least tell me what I'm trying to say here. The Roman Senate. Does that make sense? We talked about that a little bit. What region's important in the trade of gold and salt? Okay, West Africa. Awesome. Who's the richest person who ever lived? Mansa Musa. If you print more money, or Mansa Musa just passes out gold, what did that cause? Inflation. Okay, great. You did awesome. I look forward to seeing you soon. Hey, coming up next, you got a quiz on Wednesday, and then we'll get back into chapter 2 and 3 next week. So take care.